We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order with a quorum of 7 trustees. And the first item will be item C, public comment. Do we have any public comment? We do not. Okay. Which takes us to D1, which is sure to be a favorite activity of the evening, Board of Trustee picture. So we will... definitely on. I didn't shave. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Y'all gonna sit down and get in your situation. Attican's gonna get ready, and then you can go down real quick and take your pictures.
We will retire for just a few moments, and we will be right back. No, I got it. Thank you.
We'll give Mr. Nugent just a quick moment, and then we'll pick up with our next agenda item.
All right. Well, that brings us to item 2, consideration, discussion, and possible action regarding strategic planning and prospective facilitators. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent. So my original plan this evening was for us to debrief, discuss, review, provide feedback on the 2 strategic planning facilitator presentations that we had last Tuesday. What I would like to propose to the board is the possibility of us having one more additional facilitator presentation from a 3rd possible facilitator the first part of January, and then we can debrief the 3 collectively and make a decision on which direction we might want to go. Molly and I visited with the 3rd possible one today, and I think it might be worth just hearing from one more group before we make such a significant decision. Unless someone feels completely committed tonight.
How's that going to work as far as time frame with our
I think
January?
What I would look at doing, Mr. Mann, is maybe scheduling something with the group. Sorry, I need to look at my calendar for January. I'm just getting through for the week of the 11th. And then when we come to our regular meeting in January on the 19th, then we can make a decision. I think all of them can adjust their timeline accordingly and get us started in February. So do we lose a week with the holiday built in here? We're not losing time with the holiday. We lose a week or 2 maybe from January, but I think it might be worthwhile just to have 3 different folks to consider. From our presentations, I think they're completely kind of different approaches, significantly different. And so I was thinking of something maybe a little bit more in the middle as far as perspective. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't benefit us to hear from one more group. If we make the timeline work, I don't know that it hurts us so much.
Okay, yeah, that was just my main concern. Is I really liked your thought of having it done by the next school year starting, and so if we can do that, then that sounds great.
Yeah, this would not, in my mind, really compromise us being able to be finished by August.
When I was thinking about this, Mr. Ben, I was a little concerned about that as well. I think it needs to be done by the new school year. But with the holidays built in, I thought, I don't think, if we took action tonight as opposed to next month, I don't think we're losing 4 weeks. I think we're probably losing maybe 2, maybe 3, but I think it's negligible. So. Any other comment?
Well, I am also okay with getting or more than okay with getting a 3rd option to look at, like just for the reasons you expressed. Would it be possible for us to even meet that week of January 11th and then even to get the presentation and then even discuss then maybe? And
we can absolutely, we can absolutely do that, Ms. McAlpin. So actually we would lose a week maybe, if that, because we could absolutely schedule the presentation as an agenda item, and then as the second one, if we think we want to comb through it and make a decision after that, we can make a decision the same day. We absolutely could. We can write it as an agenda a possible action item, and if we have the 3rd presentation, we're like, well, that just sealed the deal as far as what we think. We can take action. If we need a little bit of time, we can not take action and bring it around at the regular meeting. So we could actually do it the same day. Absolutely, we could.
If we do it the same day, can we do it later in the afternoon?
Yes, I was going to ask the group this, and I'll send some possible dates, but I was going to ask, would y'all prefer like a 5 o'clock as opposed to a noon or something? So I'm not creating, a situation for folks in their work schedule. Like a 5 to 6, or we'd start at 5 for an hour or two. Would that work better for people, just so it doesn't interrupt your day with any work commitments? Is that better for everyone? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine with me. That's good.
Okay.
I am going to be a huge pain right now, though, that week of the 11th. And I mean, I would love to, obviously to have it, but also to have the meeting, but to also be able to discuss it and perhaps take action. I am not here until the 14th 14th and 15th. I'm here Thursday, Friday, but Monday through Wednesday, I'm done.
So let's just do this now. Let's talk about this real quick, if everybody's good. What does this, and I haven't spoken, I don't have dates available from the facilitator, so I'm going to have to run this through them as well. You know, we return on the, what's like the 7th? Is that too early after the break? Are folks still out and about?
I'd say just ask the question with the facilitators and see what their schedule looks like. Maybe the 7th, 14th.
Okay.
Just
let's start with, is that okay to start with everybody? And then that covers you too, Mike?
Absolutely.
7th, 14th, and I'll look at 5 p.m. Okay. It just gives us one more reference point. And if we're doing it the 7th, then we lose nothing on this at all, because nothing was going to happen the next 2 weeks. I think I'd just like to have a feel for one more. We have numerous calls and Zoom meetings with folks, and then with me and Molly, or me and Penny, or me and Tiffany, and it's different than us as a group of 8 and in person. And I think it's extremely important that wherever we land, it's something that we as a team, a facilitator, we really connect with. So I think providing a third option just to give us scale, if nothing else, if everyone's okay with that. Good?
Yeah, just a quick note that the 7th is PAC, I think, right?
Okay, so we'll have to
Either do it after that or...
Yeah, we do it like at 5:30 or around that. With the last PAC meeting, Ms. Perry did, and apparently it was over in like 20 minutes. So maybe I just need to have Mrs. Perry do the PAC meetings. That way we can make sure we start at 5. Oh, that's true. We don't have a PAC meeting in January. It's February. Yes, sir. February. Very good. All right. Thank you guys for allowing me some discretion on this one.
Well, that will take us to item 3, receive annual enrollment report from our friends at Templeton Demographics.
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Nugent. Bob Templeton is here this evening from Templeton Demographics. He's going to give us our presentation this evening, our enrollment update. Let me mention this to you. Bob will provide demographic study, and we will take this information, his presentation. I'll take the data and the enrollment projections he provides in this presentation, and I carry that over in the regular board meeting, and I'll apply local policy FC to that. So this is kind of the first piece, and then for those of you familiar with FC local, we kind of take a look at that and look at facility utilization and comparability and those types of things, just to see what we need to start thinking about for future planning. So, Bob, thank you for being here this evening. I know really you came to see the grandbaby after the meeting, but thank you for using us for that. We appreciate it.
That's true. We have had our first grandchild born right here in College Station, and he is, I guess, about 5 weeks old now. And so, yes, I'm picking up dinner and going to get to spend a little time with them. So it's a real treat to be here with you tonight. And me and my wife were really arguing, kind of racing about who could get here the fastest. Well, I beat her. So she's coming this weekend, so I got to jump on her. Well, this is crazy, this fall. This fall has really been the most unusual fall that we have ever seen. You know, this is my first pandemic of significance to have to work through. And I want to start by just talking about the enrollment patterns that we saw this fall. And you're well aware that your enrollment is down a little bit. And so we were forecasting that you would be at about 14,288. So we were forecasting some growth. And your enrollment in October was about 13,700, and it was down about 212 students, and it's roughly about 4% under what the forecasted number was. Now, we work with about 90 school districts in Texas, and the average for all of our clients has been in that 5 to 6% range. Now, we're talking about the fastest growing school districts in Texas. So this phenomenon is not specific to College Station. This is happening all over the country. In fact, each day I'm reading about other states that are missing 50,000 kids. North Carolina missing significant numbers. I'm predicting for Texas, when the TEA releases the enrollment data for this fall, Texas is probably going to be somewhere down at least 150,000, could be 200,000. Now, we normally grow 60,000 to 80,000 kids a year in Texas. So that's the kind of impact that this COVID is having. Now, what we've seen consistently with all of our clients is the drop in enrollment is primarily at the elementary grade levels. The middle school grades, high school grades really came in pretty close to what we were expecting. And you'll notice that in this kind of this is the comparison to the enrollment to the projections. And you can see, kindergarten down 73, first grade down 51, second 74, third 80, and then it gets better as we move up. And when we get to the high school grades, they're still down a little bit, but not as extreme as what we saw in the elementary grades. Now, one of the things we know from the interviews that we've done with other charter schools and with the other, schools in the region, that this is happening at charters as well. It's happening at all public schools. Where we're seeing the surge is in homeschool. So we have seen a pickup or an increase in homeschool enrollment. That's based on our interview with the Texas Homeschool Association. That data is not public information, so we just have to go on what we can derive from the interview that we had with them. Now, we also believe that there's a significant number of pre-K, kindergarten first, that are taking it kind of like a gap year, and they're just not engaging. They're just not attending school, period. And that's mostly with the economically disadvantaged population. Some of that could be lack of good technology or support. And so therefore, we're seeing that all across the state of Texas as well. It's going to be a real challenge next fall when the six-year-olds show up, that there's going to be a significant number of those 6-year-olds that didn't participate in kindergarten. So therefore, I'm encouraging our clients to get a real jump on the kindergarten roundup, because there's going to be a real need to try to get some of that going a little earlier. Now, I do think that we're going to see some of the COVID return. It's already starting to take place. So we are seeing the enrollments are climbing at a majority of our clients, that they've already grown since the October snapshot. We think that over the holidays or Christmas break, we'll see a little bit of a surge. The vaccine is providing some optimism. Now, we're still a long way from having herd immunity from the vaccine. It's going to come out gradually, as you know, but by late spring, early summer, that's really when the estimate is for the herd immunity to kick in. And so I'm really predicting that late spring over the summer is when we're going to kind of get back to normal. Now, I want to touch on some of the economic conditions. College Station is really one of the best economic areas of the major cities in Texas. The unemployment rate actually got back down to about 4.5% for the College Station Bryan MSA. Now, keep in mind, when we were looking at pre-pandemic, that unemployment rate was in that 2 to 2.5% range. So, but really 4 to 4.5%, 5% is still much better than what we're seeing across the rest of the state of Texas and what we're seeing across the country. Jobs are still down, so we do still see that we're negative in jobs. But as we get back to more normal operations with the economy and with jobs, we do think it's going to get back up a little bit more in the spring. The housing market has been the true outlier. It has been the one aspect of the economy that there is no way back in March, April, that we would have seen what was going to happen with the housing market. This is likely going to be one of their best years in the last 20 years is going to be the 2020 year. And it's the low interest rates. It's a little bit of this movement from certain areas or from multifamily into single family. And so there is some of that movement that's happening. But the new single family construction market has really benefited during this last 6 months. Now, this again is looking at those unemployment rates for the area. You can see the significant difference between the state of Texas and what's happening here in College Station. So much, much better. The housing market is doing very well. This is total home sales within College Station ISD. So you can see this is also through about October. We're easily going to surpass what we did in 2019. So the total home sales, that's existing homes and new home sales, are going to surpass what we saw last year. We do expect that's going to continue on into 2021. I'll touch on some of the highlights. This is a map of your district with your elementary attendance zones. Those green shaded areas are the active subdivisions that are building single family homes. Where you see a red outline around either a green or a yellow, those are areas where development is taking place. Bulldozers, groundwork is underway to deliver additional lots. So there's a significant amount of development activity. We've got about 1,200 vacant developed lots ready for builders to build on. We've got about 4,100 lots that are in the planning stages to be developed. That means those are some future phases of some existing developments. It is some brand new developments, and I'm going to touch on the highlights of those with the following slides. Here we've got Southern Point, which is almost 2,000 total single family lots. About 73 homes are occupied, so it's really just getting started. About 240 multifamily unit complex to be constructed over the next 2 to 3 years, so we haven't seen any permitting on that presently. They built about 40 homes in 2020. We do expect they're going to do more than that in 2021. That's in the Pebble Creek Elementary Attendance Zone. Next, we've got Castlegate. It's in the Spring Creek Elementary Zone, about 840 total lots. 69 vacant domestic lots that are available. They've closed 47 homes in 2020, a little bit higher price point, starting at about $400,000. Next, down in the Greens Prairie Elementary Zone, we've got Creek Meadows. It's about 1,005 total lots, about 125 vacant lots. They're built about 46 homes in the last 12 months. It's a little lower price point, starting at about $280,000. And then we've got Greens Prairie Reserve, about 902 total lots, about 91 vacant lots. The first homes were completed this past February. It's estimating that it's going to take about 10 years to build out. So roughly anywhere from, I'd say, 60 to 90 homes per year is what we could see out of the Greens Prairie Reserve. Starts at about 350.
Hey, Bob, before,
Yes.
if you can go back just real quick. In the Castlegate, that's actually the phase 2 piece, I believe. I just want to give everybody a second to kind of look and digest the name where it says Greensbury, the white with the red around it. That's the actual zone. So you can kind of tell which schools that particular area is zoned to. So just to kind of give you a lay of the land of the maps that he's referencing. And you, of course, you can see the school, the actual location of the campuses with the star.
That's a great point. I don't often comment on the maps, but yes, the red dashed line does represent the outline of the elementary zone. And then we do sometimes put a label for the zone. Even the Greens Prairie is not located at this point. It's just labeling. Where you see a star, that's going to be when it's indicating the actual location of the elementary school. Next, we're looking at Wellborn Settlement. It's a future development with 115 lots. The groundwork is underway. Home building is estimated to start spring of 2021. We're estimating that they'll build about 20 homes a year, so it could be about a 4 to 5 year build out for the Wellborn Settlement, and it's very close to the Greens Prairie Elementary School. A little further south, we've got Winding Creek Estates. It's 87 total lots. It's also just getting started. There's 7 occupied homes. First residence, summer of 2020. Building about 3 homes in the last 12 months. That's a little higher price point, so it starts at about $530. Mission Ranch, it's in the Riverbend elementary zone. It's right around the Riverbend Elementary School. About 538 total lots, 82 vacant developed lots. They closed 56 homes in the last 12 months, building about 50 to 70 homes per year. About a 5-year build out of that community, starting at about $350,000. Next, we're looking at the Midtown Reserve, 670 total lots, about 232 vacant developed lots. First residence this past March, estimating building about 75 to 100 homes per year. That's a D.R. Horton builder, and they are a production builder, so they're all about volume and getting through there as fast as they can. They start at about $220,000. Now that's just the overview, the highlights of the single family data. I'm going to touch on the multifamily picture. We've got about 1,342 multifamily units that are nearing completion. Within College Station ISD, there's roughly 298 future multifamily units that are in the planning stages. Of those, 159 units are student-focused housing, and there's about 120 units that are age-restricted senior, so therefore it'd have a 0 impact of students. But you can see there's a few multifamily projects that are in the works down in the Forest Ridge Elementary Zone, the Southwood Valley, the Rock Prairie, and then we've got a couple of future developments in the College Hills and South Knoll. Overall, the biggest driver for your enrollment growth is single family, new homes. The multifamily does produce some, but it's a minimal amount compared to what we see with single family. Now, this is our housing forecast. So we've done a forecast for the next 5 years. The blue portion of this bar graph represents the new single family. The red portion of the graph represents the forecasted multifamily. So we're forecasting on the single family side about 500 homes a year for the next 5 years. You can see we've got a pretty significant surge of multifamily for next year, and then it dwindles off. But we could see about 180 to 480 multifamily units a year during that 5-year window. But it is going to be the single family that's going to drive your enrollment growth. Now, this is a map to show you where we are forecasting the housing additions. So we're forecasting over the next 5 years about 575 units in Pebble Creek, about 537 in Greens Prairie, 355 in Spring Creek, 329 in Southwood Valley, and about 266 in Riverbend. So those are the areas that are going to see the most housing units. The dark blue areas are where the growth is the highest. So more than 150 units in these dark blue areas. Where you see kind of a lighter blue, it's between 101 and 150, dark green between 51 and 100. This is just a thematic map just to give you a real quick and easy way to see where the housing is going to be concentrated over the next 5 years. And this is just another different way to look at the data. The dark blue portion of the bar represents the current housing units in those zones. And then the light blue bar portion is the forecasted single family. The purple is the forecasted multifamily. So you can see the highlights here. It's the Southwood Valley, Spring Creek, Pebble Creek, Greens Prairie. Those are your top 4 for the most single family housing units over the next 5-year period. Now here's what it's going to cause to happen with the enrollment forecast. You'll notice this year's enrollment is down. Next year, we're growing at 519, about 3.8%. We are forecasting a COVID bump or a COVID return. That's why it shoots up to 519, is because we do believe there could be anywhere from 200 to 250 or so students that are bouncing back. We think you'll see the fruit of that or see evidence of that in the spring. So you're going to see some of this return, I think, in the spring. And so I will encourage us we're going to stay really close to the data. We'll be getting enrollment reports, visiting with, Mr. Martindale and making sure that we're understanding the trends that are happening. We're also going to be studying the housing market very closely in the spring to see what happens with the housing. It is estimated that the interest rates are still going to stay very low. Some estimates are we could see a little bit of an adjustment, but not until we get to 2022. Not seeing any forecasted increase in the interest rate in 2021. Now you'll notice beyond next year, that growth stays at a little over 2%. So it's growing at about, you can see almost 400 kids in 2022, and then it's around 300 to 350. So over the next 5 years, you can see your enrollment's going to get to about 15,005. I think there's a real good case for that to happen based on what we're seeing in the housing market. Now here's what it does to your campuses. So you'll notice the elementary this fall was about 5,439, down about 224. You can see the bounce back. We're bouncing it back to about 5,785, 5,785. You can see the campuses where it's bouncing. Now it was mostly at the pre-K, kindergarten, first, second, so it was those younger elementary grades. In 5 years, the enrollment in those elementary schools could get to about 6,428. At your intermediate schools, it's also going to about from 2,056 to about almost 22,282-ish students in that 5-year period. Your intermediates seem to be in pretty good shape capacity-wise. At the elementary schools, you're going to have a couple of elementaries that are going to be pushing their capacity limits over that 5-year period. When we look at the secondary campuses, your middle schools at about 2147 this past fall, it gets to about 2132, and I'm going to back up a little bit and show you the reason why that's happening. Look at the large grade that you've got right up here in 7th grade. So your 7th grade is almost 1,100 students, and your 6th and 8th about 1,055. Look at the second, third, fourth. They're a little bit smaller. So we're migrating those up, and that's what's kind of giving you a false sense that it's not growing. It's just the reality is we've got some smaller grades that are coming up into those middle school grades, and you can see the wave. See, the green and yellow grades are the largest and second largest grades per year. So you can see where they're presently at right now. So they're here in the middle schools. So then when they work their way through, you'll notice that it starts to grow significantly out here in year 27, 28. That's when it's going to get its next wave from the next group of larger classes that start to work their way up. Now at the high school, the reason it's growing so much in the next 2 years, it goes back to that wave. Where's the wave right now? Right now, it's in 7th grade and it's in 9th grade. So then those grades working their way up are hitting the high schools over the next couple of years. And that's why that high school number is surging like it's surging over the next 3 years. I've got the most confidence of any of the campuses in our forecast at the high school campus because we have so much leading numbers to help show us what's happening. Now I'm going to summarize and go back and be ready to answer any questions. College Station will continue to experience enrollment growth. This year was a COVID response. It didn't have anything to do with something happening locally. It had to do with COVID concerns. The district has more than 1,200 lots available to build on and about 4,100 future lots. So the reality is you've got about 5,300 houses to be added over the next several years. Then College Station is expected to close between 350 to 500 single-family homes per year for the next 5 years. And that's going to put your enrollment in the fall of 2021 at about 14,200. In 5 years, it's going to grow about 1,800 students, and that'll put your enrollment at about 15,500. And then in 10 years, your enrollment could be close to 16,800.
So, Bob, let me And I know it's not this evenly balanced, but just so there's not panic amongst the board listening to the growth. 5-year enrollment growth, approximately 1,800. Okay. We have 19 campuses. That's on average less than 100 a campus. Okay, so again, we'll take these numbers and apply FC local and building capacity to it. But if you think about it amongst, and I know it's not evenly balanced, but amongst the collective district, we're in a very manageable place.
I think it's more traumatizing to see the year 2031 up there. Goodness
Exactly.
gracious.
It's really interesting what's happened. It's our team is really, we're having a lot of discussion and dialogue about the after COVID. You know, what's it going to be like after? Because there are certain dynamics at play that I already know for a fact are not going to go back to how they were. One of those elements is remote work. Prior to the pandemic, 6% of the total workforce worked virtually or remotely. When the pandemic happened, it went to 21%. Just like that, went to 21%. Now, our team of 12, we had 2 that worked just 2 days remotely, and now we've all worked remotely for the last 7 months. And our big company above us, we had 36 offices across the country, 400 employees, and we went to 100% remote. And the leadership is telling us that within 2 years, we're going to close over 20 offices, and that our office, when our office lease expires, we know it's going to be closed. And so our team is preparing to work remotely permanently. Now, we're just one little company that has realized that how can we save millions of dollars in rent by going and switching to this remote work. And literally every day I'm reading about more and more companies that are making those kinds of decisions to continue to allow employees to work remotely. Now, what's the trickle effect of that? It allows people to live where they want to live, where the quality of life is better. And I can tell you without a doubt, there's a lot of people that want to live in College Station, because I'm talking to friends all over the country that either graduated from A&M or want to be back here. So there are certain areas that will become hotspots for folks to work and live in different areas. Now, I think that there's going to be districts that are going to really benefit from it, and I think the urban districts are going to get obliterated because of it. When I say urban districts, I'm talking about the Houston ISDs, Dallas ISDs, Fort Worth ISD, Austin ISD. We work with 2 of those. And their numbers are down 6,000 kids, and it's not likely that that is going to be as much of a return. So I think the reality for the College Stations and some of those destination districts, they're really going to be in a position to not see anything significantly different. Now, I think now what does this do to virtual learning? Elementary is going to go back to how it was before, in my opinion, because the elementary need is so great to be in person. There's a significant need for that. Those elementary kindergarten kids, those younger kids have to have that. But at the secondary level, I do think we're going to continue to see the request from secondary families and kids to have a portion of their academics virtually. And it's not going to be all or nothing, not all one or all the other. I think we're going to see this request for that. Now, that's going to be the real challenge to a part of your strategic plan, is to figure out how we're going to deal with virtual learning going forward, because we went from, in the state of Texas last year, there was only about 20,000 kids that participated in their the virtual network. Now, what do we have this year? Out of our 5 million kids, 5.6 million kids, it's in the hundreds of thousands that are participating now. So it's going to be some real interesting strategic planning time.
I think you bring up a good point, that the variable is the fact that, while these numbers are great to see, they could be significantly higher depending on home sales, the virtual option of work now, and what families are moving here. So while these numbers are great, they're almost terrifying to think of what they could be and what that does to us as a school district so rapidly. So, I mean, it's the good and the bad with it all. And I think we're headed in the right direction on it, but I think we have to be mindful that these numbers could increase dramatically a lot quicker than we expect. I mean, would that be correct?
Well, and that's the beauty of our approach is to watch the data throughout the year. So we're watching the housing data literally on a monthly basis. And I think tracking your enrollment so that you can see what's happening with enrollment. I'm sure you're reading the same headlines that I'm reading. Elon Musk, where is he moving? He's not only started his plant in Austin, but he's personally moving to Texas now. Oracle, where's Oracle going? Not to Hawaii. They're going to Austin, Texas.
But he moved to Hawaii.
Did he? Okay. So that's great. You know, but his business is coming to Texas. And then you've got the Dropbox founder. He's coming to Texas. So, I mean, there's a real migration that's continuing to come to Texas. And economically, I think it's going to be a real benefit. But to your point, it is going to create some real challenges. There's going to be some winners and losers on this.
Bob, a couple of points, and I know you guys pulled data the first part of October, so our enrollment was 13,000, just a little over 13,700. I remember earlier in your presentation. And I'm looking at today's, and it's 13,791. So since the 1st of October to now, you know, plus 80,
100 kids.
Something like that, yes. Yep. Also, you mentioned early on, as far as our enrollment loss being for this year relative to COVID at 1.5%. That is no loss is good, but that's fairly small relative to other districts you work with, correct?
It's much smaller than what we've seen with the majority of our districts.
Okay.
In the Austin area, it was the worst hit, which, you know, doesn't make sense really because that's the strongest city economy in the state of Texas, but they had the biggest drop in enrollment. Dallas had the next best area for least, but this area, Belton was also one of the highlights that didn't really get affected. But no, your enrollment drop was one of the better ones of the clients that we work with.
And I think, Mr. Horak, what will be interesting is what the numbers look like this time next year. You know, to see what really does occur relative to transition, you know, post-COVID. Hopefully that's the plan anyway. So I would be very interested what the data looks like this time next year. It's got to be terribly difficult to project next year. I think probably more challenging than the out years.
Yes. Yeah. Me and our consulting team, we're spending hours more. We're running the models multiple ways, and it is very interesting in what's happening because it's historic. We've never had anything like it. Normally, when we have seen an enrollment drop, it's typically been in response to a natural disaster. Rita, Katrina, it's really focused. The Houston area with hurricanes, or with wildfires, or with some economic loss because of a plant closed down or some minor, but we've never seen anything like this that was so global and so, a portion of it is related to the COVID response, the COVID fear, or, you know, and it's extreme on both sides on the responses to it. But we also found that districts that started in person saw a better response than those that started 100% virtually or delayed it so long. You know, many of the Austin districts are still virtual, 100%. And so many of them do not have the in-person back to any degree. And so those are the areas where the families are opting out, and they're finding those opportunities where they can be in person.
Can I ask a question about the housing growth? So you talked about a lot of potential housing growth here. How do you, give us a little insight on how you factor that into the numbers? I mean, like, how do you know what grade a kid's going to be in based on a house and,
well,
and
it
so
is
forth?
specific to the price point. So the price point does, I would say, I'll give you an average. The average for a new home is about 0.5 students per house. So that 350 to 500 homes a year is roughly generating 250-ish students right there. But then we're also factoring in the cohort grade advancement growth. There's literally 1,000 calculations that are taking place when we do our projections, because we're calculating every campus, every grade over a 10-year period. Now we study each elementary zone, and we're looking at the housing within that elementary zone, and we're looking at the yields for that specific zone. So we don't have a global application that goes for every new house. So it is specific to the zone, but roughly it's about 0.5 students per house. The more expensive the house, you remember some of those starting price points were $580 versus the D.R. Horton, which is I think around $250, $300. So the yield will be about the same, the 0.5, but the difference will be the $500,000 is going to be higher at the middle school and high school, lower at the elementary, versus the less expensive home, it's a higher elementary, smaller secondary portion. So it kind of flips based upon the price range. It's a great question. And we geocode your students, so we're matching your student database to the addresses. So then we can look at the yields by those regions.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. Did I see it right? Like our River Bend Elementary had like the most houses, but we know it's not a full school, right?
Well, and there's some there's some older housing stock in that.
Yeah.
So therefore, the older housing stock, may not have as many students, but over time that could really change.
Kind of a related question. I was wondering if you put this into your model at all or have some insight on, and maybe it's just a perception on my part, that sometimes students from either private schools or charter schools or even homeschooling come back into the district at certain times, maybe high school because of the opportunities that we have at the high school. Is that something you see?
Yes.
And is it something you take into account?
Oh, it is.
In the models?
Definitely it is. Now, we will typically see that in 6th grade and at 8th, 9th. So a lot of families may opt to go either private or charter for the elementary experience, but the charter situation cannot compete with the school district for those secondary, extracurricular, fine arts. So then we will see a migration back at sometimes 6th, 8th, and 9th grade. 9th grade is when they want to get into the high school, but a lot of families will opt to do that at the middle school because they know the middle school is the gateway into getting into those activities and those events. And so we'll see it there as well. But typically it reveals itself, and I'll go back and see, it's a great question. You can kind of see that in this. And if you look at those, the 3-year average on the cohorts, see 6th and 7th, yours are there. Look, it's a little higher than those other grade levels. And 9th. So the 9th is that one of those where they're coming back in a little bit in 9th grade. But yes, it's the mobility cohort patterns that we use to help anticipate those.
Thank you. Very interesting.
So again, what we'll do at the regular meeting is I will take the enrollment projections and I'll use the 5-year projection and we'll look at it by campus, facility capacity, highlight the ranges identified in policy just to draw out where we are. Any other questions for Bob?
Well, thank you for allowing me to be here. Yes.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Good to be here. Yep.
maybe you beat your wife over there.
That's right.
All right, all right.
Go see that grandbaby.
That's right. Is the grandbaby in the data already? That's the real question.
Right, exactly.
Probably.
Yeah, no pictures?
Oh, I've got pictures.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, sir. All right, that will take us to item 4, consideration and discussion related to future bond capacity and planning. Mr. Martindale.
All right, Ms. Strauss is going to continue just to give us some information. She shared with us in the past our potential bonding capacity. She'll add a little more to it as far as draft timelines and some of those types of things if we decide ultimately to move forward with this conversation in the next few months. Ms. Strauss?
Thank you. So if you'll remember, I visited with you last month a little bit about this, and so I'm following up on that and bringing you more information, and it's on, I just need to turn it. We're going to review the bond capacity that we went over last time. There is some new requirements for bond referendums and bond elections from the last time that you all went through this, so we're going to go over that. A potential timeline, what some content might be in the next bond referendum that you might want to look at, and some reasons that we might want to consider one upcoming in 2021, although it can definitely be pushed later as well. This is the same information I shared with you last time. Again, it's unusual for College Station to not have growth, but with COVID and the economy, want to be very conservative. So looking at our current debt, that what we have and what's being paid off and what we refunded this last year, if we have no change in the assessed valuation for 2022, and so we have 2021 to go with, we've estimated, based on interest rates and some other things, that College Station could potentially issue around $58 million of bonded indebtedness with a 25-year payout for everything, and be able to remain at the 26.3% tax rate we have for debt service currently. Now let's go to a kind of a worst case scenario, which we hope this doesn't happen, but if, due to the economic impact of COVID, we have a 2% decline, and then we stabilize after that, our financial advisors have estimated $44.5 million of capacity at that still 26.3 cent tax rate. So that information has not changed. So what has changed since your 2015 referendum? First of all, there's several categories that, if they are included, have to have their own ballot referendum ballot language, and the voters get to vote on it separately. So that being the construction, acquisition, or equipment for specific facilities. So anything you do in a stadium where they seat 1,000 spectators or more must have its own referendum. That would be repairs or new facilities, anything like that. A natatorium. Recreational facilities other than a gym, playground, or play area has to be separate. A performing arts facility, and teacher housing. Okay, that's all under the construction part that has to be separate. Then they went in and added technology equipment other than security or infrastructure that's part of a new facility construction has to be separate. So that's very different than what we've had in the past. And then there's the mandatory ballot language that has to be in all caps, regardless of what you do with your rate. And that is, this is going to be on the ballot. This is a property tax increase. Okay, the philosophy there is, without adding new debt, of course, you wouldn't need as much property tax revenue in. So, and your property tax rate takes into account debt that's falling off, as well as increase in values as well. And we must post a sample ballot and all of the voter information on our website. So those are highlights of some of the changes that we will see in any future referendum that we have.
Can I ask what teacher housing is? I just don't even know what that is.
Some districts, and honestly, I do not know of any, as some incentive, they may have if you're in a very remote area where it's hard to find housing, They may have an apartment complex or something where it's built and the teachers are paying rent. It's not provided free. But there is some places out there that do that. I honestly don't know of any specific, but
We're not in that business,
No.
Ms. Nolan.
that's probably one we will not see. So if you should decide to move forward for a November 2021, this is what the election timeline would look like. So the last day to adopt the order for you as Board of Trustees and call it would be August 16th of 2021. And then going backwards, the last day to register to vote when you're working back from that election day would be October 4th. Early voting would start October 18th. The last day for early voting, October 29th, and election day would actually be November 2nd of 2021. But then internally, we would have our own timeline, and this is just an example. So it would change with anything specific, but we've already started working with you right now, just talking about it, that potential. If you decide to move forward, we will have more conversations with our financial advisors and bond counsel to make sure we get everything right. We would establish a facility committee, and that's part of the FC local, not FC local, I'm sorry, that's the other one, but there is a policy specific for this for your district. A smaller bond referendum, that committee could probably get their work done fairly quickly, so I don't have them meeting for very long here, but that can all be changed. A master plan, come before the board, and working toward a review of that plan and then calling it in August or earlier and working toward that election date in November. So that's kind of what an internal timeline might look like. So regardless of the size, there's still a lot of work to do. So talking about some content for a smaller bond referendum, we would be looking for buses. If you'll recall, you did have a transportation report, and we're in very good shape right now, but it's not going to be very long that our buses are going to start aging out. Facility renovations, safety and security, fine arts, maintenance items, and I call these deferred maintenance. They're air conditioning, roofs, plumbing, electrical, these type things. And when you talk about the size of schools, that ticket dollar cost on these are very large. Some land, just in case we find some. It's very hard to find, but we currently have 3 vacant properties within College Station ISD that the district owns. But if that should come up, we would want to word the bond in such a way that it would allow us to make that purchase. And then technology, and I've noted that of everything we've put here, that would be the only one that would have to be separated. So again, why would we even want to consider it at this point when we just heard the demographer's report? We've had a slight decline this year. It's going to take us a little while to catch up, and we're going to talk later about the specifics on our buildings, which we're in pretty good shape. But it will allow the district to address some needed projects now instead of waiting until that new facility is needed in several years down the road. So there's still a lot of things that we need to do. Interest rates, again, that was mentioned in the previous presentation, are at pretty much an all-time low. And so we could take advantage of those low interest rates. We would utilize the property values and the retired debt that we've been able to do to manage that tax rate at 26.3 cents and be able to hold it there. And even doing that, we would still be able to leave capacity for that new facility bond that might come up later, because we've got some debt falling off again in several years to help manage that. And it would lower the amount of that next bond referendum because we'll be taking care of some things now. So those are just some things to consider. Are there any questions?
I don't want to interrupt Mr. Nugent.
Well,
Looks like he's
I
back.
wasn't really saying anything. I was just wondering if there were any questions.
So, Amy, just with the steps, future steps. So if this is something that the board chose to explore, in January, they could take action and issue direction to us by policy. I think it's BDB, but that policy allows us to pull together an ad hoc committee, and that committee's purpose could be, or to charter a committee, and their purpose could be to explore this information and possible projects and ultimately make a recommendation to the board. So if that was a preference, we would take action, or they would issue direction to us January, February. We'd charter the committee February, March, and that work could start soon thereafter. And then the committee could come back to the board in the spring semester. Plenty of time to make any type of recommendation from their work about the possibility of, or not, of a small bond for some items.
Yes, sir. I think
Correct.
that timeline's very appropriate. So, come back in January, discuss the policy and what the board would do. We could either ask you to take action then or wait until February. We'd still have time. In the meantime, district administrative staff will begin working, identifying and prioritizing based on need some of these things and looking at our long-range plans and incorporating those into it. So we would begin that work immediately.
Now, the committee that was mentioned on the timeline, I believe it was Facilities Committee? Mm-hmm. That'd be made up of who?
It's normally made up, you as a board, according to your policy, would help identify who that might be. But it would be faculty and staff, of course. Some community members would be included. Could be some teachers. You're going to have some say-so in that. But we would try to, and looking at the facility things and the renovations that might be needed, make sure that we incorporate the right groups.
I believe there are some people sitting in here that were on the last one, if I'm not mistaken. I believe I recognized some names from the 2015 charter.
Yeah. I wouldn't anticipate it being as large as that one because that was a very, large bond referendum and, you're talking about a much smaller scope. So, a lot of times you have a big group because over time, conflicts cause people to not be able to be in attendance. But whenever you have a smaller one and we can isolate and have fewer meetings, your participation remains up.
And that committee would help us. I mean, they would reach out in the community, hopefully, to see how the community feels, like if we have capacity for this. Yes, I mean, that'd be.
The charge of that committee would be to study and obviously represent the community as a whole and provide that feedback to the committee. Right. Yes, the purpose of a planning committee of sorts would be to, yes, provide that feedback to the district in those meetings regarding whether this is something to explore or propose back to the board and maybe what that is made up of.
Okay.
So in essence, we could talk about it some more in January. If it's something you wanted to explore or the board wanted us to charter a committee to explore, then we would pull that together for action and with a committee, a recommended committee roster and some meeting dates and take action on accepting that charter with that committee February, March and work with them and come back with any recommendation from that group regarding action or not.
Okay. That sounds good.
I mean, we don't have that much going on in the spring already.
I'm sitting this one thinking in my head, I'm like, man, I hope our community is ready to get involved in our school district because we're going to start asking lots of people to come and help us out, tell us what they think.
Okay.
Any questions? Any more?
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, finally, item 5, consideration and discussion related to pre-AP courses for the 2021-22 school year and beyond, and associated adjustments to board policy EIC local. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent. We've been talking about this for some time. The recommendation has evolved since last November, and I will allow Dr. Trammell and Ms. Parkerson to kind of walk us through the last committee meeting. One of the sticking points previously with the committee, I had restricted or not allowed conversation regarding grade points. If that is something that can be considered down the road, it did have an impact on people's thoughts on how we manage that and ensuring that we continue to offer the same number of courses in different content areas and just manage the name change, but then revisit things at a future date just to look at the weighting of the grade points on that. So that did have an unintended influence on those initial recommendations, kind of have come full circle. And I will stop because I've already spoke more on this than I had anticipated and turn this over to the ladies.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. We are here to give you a report on the pre-AP committee meeting that happened on December the 3rd. The focus of the meeting was to just review the committee's work on pre-AP advanced courses and to understand the committee's work in how it impacts policy EIC local, and to understand the process and timeline if changes to grade point averages were considered, and then to discuss the committee recommendation and any potential changes. Ms. Parkinson is here. Many of you may know she is getting her superintendent certification. So who knows, she may take Mr. Martindale's place one day. Just
Wow. You could have at least let me say that, Dr.
Okay,
Trammell.
I'm sorry.
Tiffany, if you will take your time, I'd appreciate it.
Watch your back.
But as a part of one of her courses, it required that Tiffany record herself and lead a district meeting. So she actually led this meeting and did an awesome job. So she is going to brief you on the committee meeting, and then we'll circle back and look at the policy that we will bring to you at the regular board meeting in hopes of adoption. Okay?
Thank you, Dr. Trammell. So as noted, the official title of this committee was the Pre-AP Committee. It has quickly evolved into Pre-AP and Advanced Courses. Because there was so much discussion that happened throughout the course of this that went well beyond simply choosing whether or not we wanted to continue using the College Board's pre-AP program. And so I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into some of those discussion points. We talked a lot about rigor and equity and making sure that we're providing all of our students opportunities to take rigorous courses and be prepared for those next steps in life after high school. We also discussed that some of our current course offerings did not necessarily have the same level of rigor, but they were also receiving the same number of GPA points. And that's really where I think that around meetings 2 and 3, we spent a lot of time, particularly in those two areas, looking at GPA as it impacts those things. And at that point, it wasn't on the table, but as Mr. Martindale noted in this last meeting, it was a great part of our conversation. We also discussed the importance of choice and wanting to make sure we have multiple customizable pathways for our students as we take them through high school. I'll give an example in our core areas. Right now, we offer 20 different science courses that students could take. In contrast, in English and social studies, we have 12. And so, we discussed a lot, why there are those discrepancies where students in math and science in particular start differentiating their pathways even as low as intermediate and middle school, depending on different math courses that are taken. And that has a variety of impacts on our course offerings at the high school level. But at the core of that, we hold tightly held there is choice for our kiddos. We also discussed a lot the social emotional impacts of students' course loads at the high school level, and how students who are enrolled in multiple advanced placement courses and as well as in multiple extracurricular activities, have kind of a trial by fire, if you will, of learning how to balance all of those different things, that push and pull of the other education of those extracurricular activities with also still keeping their academic needs first and foremost. So you can tell that this committee was a lot more, went well beyond just pre-AP with our discussion. After we went through the process that Dr. Trammell described, especially delving into what another committee looking at GPA would look like and how long that timeline would be and so forth, 3/4 of the committee voted that we would like to revise the recommendation regarding course offerings having GPA as a consideration. So through the course of that meeting, we discussed that a GPA committee would not convene until probably September of 2021, at the beginning of the next school year. This would give us time to complete the strategic planning and visioning process as a district and be able to build on that in those conversations as we look at our grade point average system. We would survey a lot of comparable school districts and really look closely at EIC local and what they do with their GPAs, as well as our current course offerings and how that fits into our vision for what we would like as for opportunities for our students. And we also discussed that it would only impact kids who are not currently in high school. So if we hold this committee in the fall, the current 7th graders, who would be 8th graders next year, would be the grade level that we would look at growing this GPA change through high school with them. It would begin there. We have no preconceived ideas as to what might happen. We could convene this entire committee and land exactly where we are, but have greater reasons to support our current EIC local GPA calculations. We could end up with multiple tiers, as some districts have. There was a recent article that Molly shared in Leander where they changed to only having core classes is what they consider for GPA and class rank. And so sharing all of that to say that this GPA committee would be incredibly important. It would include those teachers and stakeholders who are already included on the pre-AP committee, and it would be expanded to include more stakeholders, of course, including members of the board, parents, and more students, so that we have more varied voices in that committee moving forward. So you can see that the majority of the committee wanted to take that route, which then led us to needing to take a look at the course recommendations for the 21-22 school year, which really, when it comes down to it, meant that we needed to delve even closer into social studies and English and look at what we're offering in those particular areas. So I'll go quickly through math. As you note, the blue column on the left, those are our current course offerings. On the right, these would be the course offerings that we would have beginning next year based on that need to change the pre-AP nomenclature to advanced. So you can see that the course offerings in math stay basically the same with a minor name change. The same holds true for science. And then in English, there are a couple of minor changes that I would like to point out. For English 1 and English 2, currently we offer both an honors and a pre-AP course at those 2 levels. After discussion with the committee, we believe that having one English 1 advanced course would enable students to have the opportunity at that junior or even senior year to determine whether they wanted to continue down the advanced pathway, go into an AP course. What's not included here is we also do have dual credit courses available at senior year as well. And so they do have quite a few choices available in the upper levels of English. English TEKS, as a former English teacher, I'll try not to get too ramped up about this. English TEKS are very much spiraled from year to year. They grow in depth and complexity, but they're not so significantly different that we saw the need to have 3 levels in grades 9 and 10. They're teaching the same skills. Right now, they're very similar. And to be honest, in different curriculum conversations that I have been part of as a former 9th grade English teacher, was that we were designing different activities for our honors and our pre-AP English 1 kiddos because the courses had 2 different names, not necessarily because of a great difference in the depth and complexity and rigor in those 2 courses. Grades 11 and 12 there are, once again, honors gets changed to advanced, and we still have the same 3 levels in those 2 areas.
And Tiffany, the 11, 12 is where the change is from the last committee meeting, putting those advanced level courses in there. So we have some ground in between on level and AP, correct? That's
Yes.
really where the difference from our last conversation.
Yes, sir, and it goes back to what I mentioned as well in the GPA conversation, that, that was really changing course on a group of students who were already midstream and had created their 5-year plans. And so in light of that as well, we as the committee rethought those 2 aspects of it to not change on our current sophomores and juniors, particularly who were already in a program of study, a pathway, if you will. Then with social studies, this is another area that is different from the previous recommendation. The honors courses that are currently offered are renamed into advanced courses, and our students would have 3 different choices in those areas as well heading into next school year. Especially at the 9th and 10th grade levels, there was a lot of discussion about going straight from an 8th grade social studies class into an advanced placement, college level 9th grade AP Human Geography course. Therefore, we landed at keeping that formerly honors, now advanced course in those course offerings as well. There was a lot of good discussion in English and social studies, to say the least, on these topics.
And that brings us to the policy change that we will be bringing to you at the regular board meeting. It is a 5-page policy, but the only change that is recommended is changing pre-AP and honors to the word advanced. And so with that, do you have any questions or comments?
Tiffany, you and Ms. Elder communicated out these courses, correct?
Yes, sir, we did. Ms. Elder and I sent an email to all of our currently enrolled 9th, 10th, and 11th grade families, which included this information about the updates for next year's course registration process and the name changes. And neither of us have had I haven't had any feedback, and I believe she had a couple of questions related to it that were readily answered.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, if you'd heard anything after sending out that email. So I guess I just want to say I feel much better about this. I truly do. So thank you for taking a step back and reconsidering putting other things on the table, the GPA consideration in the future. I think that's made a huge difference. And I understand this much better, much more clearly. What else I want to say? That and the considerations that you've made, the changes that you've made, now make a lot more sense to me as well. Keeping the 3 levels in history, and then and I understand going down to 2 levels in English as well. So overall, for me, this feels much better. So thank you. Thank you for all of your hard work, all of you, and the committee as well. I'm sure these were great discussions that they had.
I guess I'll just add basically similar sentiments that I do appreciate the continued thought and reflection and discussion on this, because that's what I was doing, reflecting on it a lot. And I do think I think we've come to for me, a good place for now. I think you did a great job explaining it, and it does make a lot of good sense. And I'm also do look forward to revisiting it really thoroughly next fall. So I think that's a good approach when we have a little more time to really sit back and think about what it really should look like ideally. And I love that you mentioned that it would follow. I was wondering why we had to wait so long, but I love that you mentioned that it would follow after strategic planning, because I think that makes perfect sense as well. So again, thanks for all the time and effort.
So this will be on the regular agenda, and what you're taking action on, in essence, is just the change that she highlighted in the policy, but you can see the course framework that accompanies that. The course framework is part of the course catalogs, not necessarily board action. The policy is. So those kind of go hand in hand. So we do have that at the regular meeting, but we want to go through, since this had shifted directions. I too agree, in a much better place. And I look forward to the Executive Director of Secondary Education leading that GPA conversation in the fall. So thank you. On that, I'm just going to stop, Mr. Nugent.
I'm still reeling from the superintendent certification.
I can think of no better preparation to be superintendent than leading work of changing GPA.
There you go. There you go. Okay. Thank y'all so much for the very informative report, but for the work that led up to it. We really, really appreciate it. With that, we will be adjourned, and we will come back in about 35 minutes for our regular meeting.